Ladies and gentlemen, we underestimate the power of our own minds. People imagine that thoughts are harmless, that what goes on inside our heads is somehow private, detached from the fabric of reality. But this is dangerously naive. Your thoughts can build you, or they can destroy you. And make no mistake, the wrong kind of thoughts, repeated long enough, can kill you spiritually, emotionally, even physically. The most dangerous mistake people make is to assume that what they see is reality itself. But that isn't true. You don't encounter the world directly. You encounter the world filtered through the structure of your mind, through the ideas you carry, through the assumptions you make. The world, in a sense, is too vast, too chaotic, too complex to simply come at you unmediated. And so what you see, what you notice, what you call reality, is deeply determined by what you think. Your thoughts are not idle. They're not whispers in some private chamber that leave the outside world untouched. They're lenses, and those lenses color everything. If you carry the thought that life is hopeless, then every event, every conversation, every opportunity is interpreted through that assumption. Someone gives you a compliment. You dismiss it because, in your mind, nothing good lasts anyway. A door opens, but you don't step through it because the thought tells you it's pointless. You think you're just being realistic, but you're not. You're living in a world manufactured by your own pessimism. And the tragic part is that once you put on that lens, you forget you're wearing it. You mistake your perception for the world itself. Now imagine the opposite. Suppose you cultivate the thought that life is filled with possibility. Does that mean you're naive, that you're blind to suffering or chaos? Not at all. It means that you see those things, but you don't reduce the entire world to them. You allow yourself to notice opportunity, to register beauty, to perceive order in the chaos. And that noticing transforms you. It energizes you. It makes you act differently. And in acting differently, you change your circumstances. This is not some abstract, mystical claim. It's a practical, psychological truth. Two people can walk down the same street at the same time and live in completely different worlds. One sees decay, corruption, danger. The other sees potential, growth, connection. They're not hallucinating. They're both encountering something real. But the filter of their thoughts determines which aspect of reality is highlighted and which is hidden. And that makes all the difference. That's why it's so perilous to allow your mind to become infested with corrosive thoughts. Once you accept the belief that the world is fundamentally hostile, or that you yourself are fundamentally worthless, you don't just hold that idea, you inhabit it. It builds the environment in which you live. Your perception is narrowed, distorted, consumed by that belief, and eventually you lose the ability to tell the difference between what's real and what's only the shadow cast by your own thinking. This is why tyrants and ideologues always target thought. Because if they can plant the right idea in your mind, they don't need chains to control you. They've already altered the world you live in. And once you've accepted the wrong frame of thought, you can become your own jailer. That is the true danger. Thoughts can enslave you without you even realizing it. But there's another side to this. If thoughts can corrupt perception, then they can also clarify it. If destructive beliefs can kill, then disciplined, truthful beliefs can resurrect. The lens works both ways. A mind shaped by honesty, gratitude, courage, such a mind sees a world worth engaging, worth building, worth suffering for. The world itself hasn't changed, but to the person with disciplined thoughts, the possibilities expand, new paths emerge, hope reappears. So when I say your thoughts shape your perception, what I mean is that they are not trivial. They are not private. They are the architects of the world you live in. And if you neglect them, if you allow poisonous thoughts to take root unchecked, you will not only misperceive reality, you will live in a diminished version of it, one that feels hostile, lifeless, and cruel. Guard your mind. because to guard your thoughts is to guard the very world you experience. We often underestimate repetition. People assume that a single thought, a fleeting moment of doubt or bitterness, is inconsequential. And in isolation, perhaps it is. But thoughts are not isolated events. They are habits in formation. Every time you entertain a thought, you strengthen a pathway in your mind, and the more you walk down that path, the more natural it feels to walk it again. In the beginning, you choose the thought. Later, the thought chooses you. And when that shift occurs, you've surrendered a part of your freedom without even noticing. Imagine resentment. The first time you feel it, you can almost see it for what it is, an ugly little thing, a shadow creeping into your heart. You can brush it aside. But if you feed it, if you rehearse it, if you replay that grievance again and again in the theater of your mind, it grows roots. Before long, you no longer say, "I feel resentment." Instead, resentment begins to define you. It becomes the lens through which you interpret others, the stance you adopt toward life. You don't have resentment anymore. Resentment has you. The same process applies to fear. A single fearful thought is a natural occurrence. We all encounter it. But dwell on it, replay it, magnify it, and soon fear becomes the dominant rhythm of your life. You stop distinguishing between legitimate danger and mere possibility. Your body reacts as though the worst case is already unfolding. And eventually, you shrink. You avoid opportunities, you avoid risks, you avoid people, until your life is no longer lived, but merely endured, all because a single thought was rehearsed. So often it became a reflex. This is how the mind works. It is neuroplastic. It shapes itself according to what you repeat. If you practice bitterness, you become bitter. If you practice despair, you become despairing. If you practice envy, you become envious. And none of this feels like practice because it happens silently in the privacy of your own head. But make no mistake, it is training. Every repetition is a rehearsal for who you are becoming. What makes this so dangerous is that the process is subtle. No one wakes up and says, "Today, I will destroy myself with my thoughts." It happens in increments, a quiet whisper of self-pity here, a replay of an old injury there. You nurse it, you turn it over, you savor it. And over time, that thought carves grooves in your mind so deep you can no longer step out of them. The thought becomes automatic. You don't think it anymore. It thinks you. And when that happens, you've handed over the steering wheel of your life. But this principle cuts both ways. Just as repeated negativity builds destruction, repeated courage builds strength, the same mechanism that enslaves you can also liberate you. Consider gratitude. If each day you deliberately call to mind even a single thing you are thankful for, you train your perception to notice abundance rather than scarcity. Do that long enough, and gratitude becomes your reflex. You don't have to force it anymore. It becomes the default setting of your mind. And with that setting comes resilience, optimism, the ability to endure suffering without collapsing. So the question is not whether you are repeating thoughts. You are. The question is which thoughts you are rehearsing, and therefore which self you are becoming. Because make no mistake, your repeated thoughts are sculpting you. They are chiseling away at your character day by day until one morning you wake up and realize you've become the very thing you've practiced in silence. That is why vigilance over thought is not optional. To be careless with repetition is to hand yourself over to forces you do not want to serve. The thoughts you rehearse are laying the foundation for your future self, for your future life. And if you repeat the wrong ones long enough, they will consume you. But if you take responsibility for repetition, if you consciously cultivate what is noble, courageous, and honest, then the thoughts will not only shape you, they will save you. There is an ancient connection between mind and body, one that modern science is only beginning to map in detail, though it has been intuited for thousands of years. The thoughts you harbor do not remain confined to some abstract mental space. They translate into chemistry, into hormones, into muscle tension, into the beating of your heart. Your body listens to your mind constantly, and it responds with precision. A single anxious thought is enough to change your breathing, to elevate your pulse, to tighten your chest. Hold on to that thought long enough, and your body forgets how to relax. You become physiologically shaped by the content of your own inner dialogue. Think about stress. When you imagine a threat, even when no actual danger is present, your body reacts as if the threat were real. The nervous system doesn't always distinguish between external reality and internal narrative. If you dwell on catastrophe, your body prepares for catastrophe. Cortisol floods your system. Adrenaline surges, blood vessels constrict, digestion slows. This is useful if a predator is leaping at you, but catastrophic if the predator is nothing but an idea circling endlessly in your head. What was meant as a short-term survival mechanism becomes, through repetition of toxic thought, a chronic condition. And what does chronic stress do? It wears you down, it corrodes your immune system, it makes you more vulnerable to illness, more susceptible to pain, more fragile in the face of challenges. People who live in a perpetual state of worry or resentment often think the suffering is limited to their mood. But no, it's written into their cells. Their body becomes the ledger where every toxic thought is recorded. And over years, that ledger becomes disease, hypertension, heart problems, digestive disorders. Even cancer progression has been linked to the chronic inflammation fueled by psychological distress. Thoughts kill not by metaphor, but by biology. Resentment is another poison. Carry resentment long enough, and you don't just feel bitter. You manifest bitterness physically. Your posture tightens, your face hardens, your muscles brace as though you are constantly preparing for battle. This makes you tired, it steals your energy, it diminishes your capacity to experience joy. It is as if your body has been conscripted into a war you fight inside your mind, a war with no resolution. The enemy is invisible, and the battlefield is your own nervous system. Hatred functions the same way. People think hatred is directed outward, that it damages only the object of their scorn. But hatred primarily corrodes the vessel that contains it. It narrows your breathing, it fuels adrenaline, it disturbs sleep. It chains you to vigilance because hatred must constantly be fed. And in the process, your body deteriorates under the strain. It is no accident that individuals consumed with bitterness often look older than their years. Their thoughts have aged them prematurely. But the mechanism works both ways. Just as destructive thoughts erode the body, constructive ones can strengthen it. Gratitude lowers stress hormones. Forgiveness reduces blood pressure. Hope stimulates neurochemicals that promote resilience and repair. These are not sentimental claims, they are measurable physiological realities. The person who disciplines their thoughts toward what is noble in life, giving is literally shaping their health. Their body responds with greater vitality because it is no longer enslaved to the constant alarms of fear and resentment. What this means is that every thought you permit is a seed with consequences. Some seeds grow thorns inside you, cutting at your organs with every heartbeat. Others grow roots of stability, grounding you, fortifying your strength. You cannot entertain destructive thoughts without paying the price in flesh and blood, nor can you entertain life, giving thoughts without reaping their reward in energy and endurance. The line between mental and physical health is far thinner than most people imagine. So when I say your thoughts can kill you, I mean that literally. They can weaken your body to the point of collapse. They can shorten your life. They can rob you of vitality long before death actually comes. And if you doubt that, consider the difference between someone whose mind is consumed with anxiety and someone whose mind is disciplined toward hope. One deteriorates before your eyes, the other seems to radiate strength even in the midst of suffering. That difference is not an accident. It is the outcome of thought made flesh. One of the most terrifying capacities of the human mind is its ability to deceive itself. We imagine that lies are something external, something spoken to manipulate others. But the more insidious form of lying is internal. It's when you begin whispering untruths to yourself, and you believe them because they are convenient, because they relieve responsibility, because they make the unbearable seem tolerable. That is how corruption takes root in the soul, not in the grand public betrayal, but in the quiet agreements you make with yourself in the dark. Think of the moments when you say, "It doesn't matter." You know perfectly well that it does matter, but to admit that would require change, discipline, sacrifice. So you tell yourself the lie, and for a moment, it soothes you. You think you've escaped the burden of responsibility, but the lie doesn't vanish. It embeds itself, and once it's there, it begins to distort your perception of everything else. You can no longer see reality clearly because your foundation is corrupted. The mind is extraordinarily clever at constructing justifications. You can convince yourself that resentment is righteousness, that cowardice is prudence, that self-indulgence is self-care. And the danger is that once you construct these narratives, you begin to believe them. You forget where the deception started. What was once deliberate becomes unconscious, and then you are possessed by it. At that point, you aren't lying anymore. The lie is living through you. This is why people end up in lives that feel unbearable. They didn't set out to ruin themselves. They set out to avoid responsibility, or to escape pain, or to nurse some grievance without admitting its cost. And in order to do that, they lied. Little by little, they distorted the truth. And then one day, they wake up and realize they are trapped in a reality that doesn't even resemble who they wanted to be. The tragedy is that they built that prison themselves, one lie at a time. And self-deception is lethal because reality always has the final word. You can pretend you are healthy while ignoring the symptoms of disease, but your body will not accept the lie. You can tell yourself your marriage is fine while bitterness festers, but the collapse will come. You can convince yourself your addiction is under control, but sooner or later, the truth reveals itself in destruction. Lies may shield you temporarily, but they accumulate a debt. And when that debt comes due, the interest is unbearable. There is also a moral dimension to this. When you lie to yourself, you corrupt not only your own perception, but also your capacity to engage honestly with others. If you refuse to face the truth within, then every relationship you enter is contaminated by that refusal. You don't meet people as they are. You meet them as distorted figures filtered through your own deceit. And so you spread corruption outward because the world you interact with is always colored by the falsehoods you carry. But truth, though painful, is the antidote. Facing the truth about your own weakness, your own flaws, your own failures, it is excruciating, but it is also liberating. The moment you name the lie, it loses its power. The moment you admit reality, you can begin to align with it. And once aligned, you can build, not easily, not without cost, but with integrity. And integrity is the only foundation strong enough to withstand the storms of existence. So when I say self-deception is lethal, I don't mean it poetically. I mean that every time you lie to yourself, you plant a seed of destruction. Those seeds grow quietly, invisibly, beneath the surface. And then, suddenly, they burst forth and you find yourself in ruins. But the opposite is also true. Every time you refuse the lie, every time you accept the sharp edge of truth, you plant seeds of resilience, strength, and authenticity. And in the long run, those seeds sustain you. That is why vigilance over your own honesty is not optional. To lie to yourself is to build your life on sand, and when the storm comes, and it always comes, the collapse is inevitable. But to face the truth, however brutal, is to begin constructing on solid ground. And that ground, though it demands courage, can bear the weight of your existence. There is a principle that governs human experience. And it is this what you dwell on expands. The thoughts you continually entertain do not remain trapped in your head. They reach outward and begin to shape the reality you inhabit. It is not mystical, not magical. It is practical, observable, inevitable. Your attention acts like a spotlight. Wherever you aim it, that part of the world becomes brighter, more detailed, more significant. And because your time and energy are limited, what you focus on comes at the expense of what you ignore. In this way, your thoughts create the boundaries of your reality. Consider envy. If you fixate on what others have, your life becomes saturated with comparisons. You stop noticing your own progress, your own blessings, your own responsibilities. Every success of another person becomes a wound to you. Every failure of your own becomes confirmation of your inadequacy. And when you live in that state, you attract more bitterness, more resentment, because that is the lens through which you engage with people. Soon, opportunities that might have lifted you pass by unnoticed because you were too consumed with measuring yourself against someone else's advantage. The same is true of fear. If your thoughts are dominated by the possibility of failure, then every chance becomes a threat rather than an opportunity. You hesitate, you avoid risk, you sabotage yourself. And the irony is that in trying to avoid failure, you guarantee it. You never build the skills, you never take the leap, you never allow yourself the possibility of growth. The thought of failure creates the very conditions in which failure becomes unavoidable. Anger functions in a similar way. If you dwell on injustice, real or imagined, you begin to see enemies everywhere. You read hostility into neutral expressions. You take offense at accidents. Your world becomes populated by adversaries, and so you live in constant battle. And what does constant battle attract? More conflict, more resistance, more chaos. You end up surrounded by the very hostility you believed was everywhere, not because it was always there, but because you conjured it by approaching the world as if it were. This mechanism works in the positive direction as well. A person who deliberately dwells on gratitude begins to see blessings that others miss. The ordinary becomes extraordinary. The mundane becomes meaningful. That doesn't mean they are blind to suffering or evil. It means they don't reduce the entire scope of existence to those things. They attract kindness because they notice it. They cultivate opportunities because they are attentive to them. And they endure hardship because they are anchored in what is good. Hope is another example. If you dwell on hope, you begin to see paths forward where others see only dead ends. You notice small cracks in the wall, places where light seeps through. You experiment, you act, you persist. And by persisting, you create openings that would have remained invisible to a hopeless mind. Hope attracts possibility, not because the universe bends to your will, but because your perception sharpens, your courage strengthens, and your actions align with the chance of something better. It is a frightening responsibility, this law of attention, because it means you cannot indulge your thoughts without consequence. What you brood on today becomes the shape of your life tomorrow. If you choose to dwell on bitterness, don't be surprised when your life grows bitter. If you choose to dwell on despair, don't be surprised when despair defines your future. But if you discipline yourself to dwell on what is good, what is true, what is worth building, then the world around you begins to reflect that orientation. So when I say you attract what you dwell on, I mean that your thoughts are not private fantasies. They are invitations. Every thought you nurture calls something into being. Some call destruction, others call growth. And over time, your life becomes the sum of what you have been inviting all along. If you want to know your future, examine your thoughts, because the future is being rehearsed in the theater of your mind. Right now, with every pattern you choose to entertain, people often want to believe that thoughts happen to them, that they arrive like weather, uncontrollable, impersonal, something to be endured rather than confronted. It's a comforting idea, because it lifts the burden of responsibility. If you are merely a victim of your thoughts, then you are not accountable for what grows inside your mind. But this is a dangerous illusion. To abdicate responsibility for your thoughts is to hand over your life to chaos. The truth is harder. You are morally responsible for what you allow to take root in your mind, because those thoughts shape who you become and what you bring into the world. Consider anger. A flash of anger may be involuntary, but what you do with it is not. You can either feed it, replaying the offense again and again, justifying your rage, sharpening it into resentment, or you can let it pass, refusing to water the seed. The choice is yours. And that choice is moral, because if you feed the thought of hatred, you will act it out in words, in gestures, in violence. You will poison not only yourself, but the people around you. The destruction that follows is not an accident. It is the harvest of the thoughts you cultivated. Or take despair. Anyone can be struck by despair. Life is difficult, suffering is real, and sometimes the weight feels unbearable. But even in that moment, there is a decision: will you surrender to the thought that nothing matters, or will you resist it, even weakly, even imperfectly? To surrender is to let the darkness spread, not only in you, but in everyone who depends on you. To resist is to affirm life, to hold the possibility of meaning, even in suffering. And that resistance is a moral act, because it acknowledges that your thoughts affect more than just yourself. They affect the structure of your family, your community, even your future. People underestimate this ripple effect. They imagine that what goes on inside their head is private, but it never is. A father consumed by bitterness communicates that bitterness to his children. A leader who broods on vengeance eventually acts it out on his people. A friend who indulges in envy poisons the relationship, often without words. Thoughts may begin in silence, but they end in action, and action always touches the world. That is why responsibility for thought is inescapable. This is also why discipline of the mind is so central to every tradition of wisdom. To guard your thoughts is not a suggestion. It is the very foundation of living rightly. It means you must learn to watch what enters your mind, to question it, to test it against truth, to refuse the easy seduction of lies and resentments. This vigilance is not comfortable. It requires effort, sacrifice, and honesty. But without it, you drift. And when you drift, the darker parts of the psyche take command. Some might say, but I cannot control what I think. And there is truth in that. You cannot control what first appears. Thoughts arise unbidden. But you can control what you do next. You can decide whether to dwell on the thought, whether to let it grow, whether to turn it over in your mind until it dominates you. That decision belongs to you. And with that decision comes responsibility. If you allow yourself to indulge in destructive thoughts, then you are responsible for the destruction that follows. If you choose to cultivate noble thoughts, then you are responsible for the growth and goodness that follows. So when I say you are morally responsible for your thinking, I mean that your thoughts are not just personal, they are ethical. They are choices that shape the future, choices that determine whether you contribute to order or chaos, to life or to death. And if you want to live rightly, you must begin there, in the unseen, in the silence of your own mind, where the first battles are fought. To win those battles is to align yourself with truth and life. To lose them is to hand yourself and everyone around you over to destruction.